They always made space for everyone else, not for me. It started the second I stepped into the Mitchell estate dining room. The long oak table already buzzing with conversation, crystal glasses chiming, hands gesturing around ideas, investments, connections. Madison's laugh rang out like it had been rehearsed. Uncle Stuart's voice filled the space whether anyone invited it or not. No one paused when I entered. No heads turned. No greetings, Rose, just a passing glance from my father as he sipped his wine. That was the cue. I was here, but I wasn't part of it. I took the only empty seat, at the far end of the table, near the kitchen doors. Not because I was late. I wasn't. But because they always forgot to set a place until I showed up. A long-standing Mitchell tradition. Pretend you belong until they remind you you don't. Kara, Aunt Daphne said after a few minutes, barely turning her head. Still doing that little startup thing? I smiled. Small, controlled. Yes, still building. She nodded, already moving on to her risotto. I didn't expect better. Not from them. They'd always treated Mitchell family gatherings like board meetings, everyone measured by their ROI. My cousin Madison had political aspirations and a podcast with a 6-figure sponsor. My brother Julian had just bought a second property in Aspen for the tax advantages. I once overheard my father say Julian could fall face first into a barrel of fish guts and still smell like wealth. I, apparently, smelled like work. At least that's how they looked at me. The conversation turned to family trusts, legacy planning, who was serious about carrying the name forward. Julian leaned in. We're reorganizing the trust portfolio. Next quarter, he said, glancing toward my father. Some things just aren't scalable anymore. Scalable. Right. Madison nodded along, swirling her wine like a TED Talk was about to emerge from the glass. It's time we put real structure around what we're passing down, she said. We can't keep subsidizing experiments. She said it with that same smoothness she used on her podcast, the kind that pretended to be diplomatic while twisting the knife. My name was never said, but it didn't need to be. I looked down at my plate, quietly pushing risotto across porcelain. They hadn't invested a cent in my company. Not that I asked. I never once pitched them. Never once begged to be seen. And yet, they still saw my independence as a liability. To them, I wasn't bold. I was unstable. Not visionary, just unfocused. They whispered that I was still playing entrepreneur, that I'd be back within a year, needing help, needing a rescue. The part that burned the most? They didn't even hate me. They just didn't believe in me. Not enough to make room at the table. Certainly not enough to listen. A bell rang from the hallway. Dinner was transitioning to the discussion, which was code for the part where the family met behind closed doors to decide who got what. Resources, responsibilities, investment opportunities. You had to be invited. Kara, my father said without looking at me, you're welcome to stay for dessert. That was the signal. I stood, smiled again. Of course. No one offered a goodbye. I wasn't leaving the family after all, just stepping aside from the parts that mattered. I walked outside into the sharp winter air. The cold wrapped around. Me, cleaner than anything that had touched my skin in that room. I took out my phone and called Alicia. She picked up on the second ring. How'd it go? She asked. They cut me off, I said flatly. There was a beat of silence on the line. They said it like it was an act of mercy, I added. Like they were finally letting me go. You okay? I let out a slow breath, then laughed, softly, bitterly. I'm fine, I said. Better than fine. Because the truth was, I saw it coming. I'd felt the blade dangling for months. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly anticipated, was that while they were busy planning my financial exile, my company had just locked in a term sheet, $40 million, pre-money valuation, $100 million, and the lead investor? A firm that had turned down Julian's third venture 6 months ago. "Alicia," I said, "send out the press embargo. We go live tomorrow at 7 a.m. "Already scheduled," she replied. "Also, your investor wants to do the announcement with you in person. They'll fly in tomorrow, 3 p.m. I nodded. My reflection in the black glass windows of the estate looked sharper than usual, like someone I used to be trying to break through. Let them have their legacy. I was building something bigger. Not a family business. A future. One that didn't need their last name to shine. As I hung up, I saw movement through the window. My father. Standing at the head of the table. Hands in motion. Everyone listening. Probably talking about stewardship. Discipline. What makes a real leader? And all I could think was, they think I'm done. They think this is the end of my story. But tomorrow? Tomorrow? My assistant would call me CEO, and for the first time, they'd have to listen. The Mitchell family didn't believe in privacy when it came to punishment. They preferred performance. So when they cut me off, they made sure to do it the way they did everything else, like a press conference, disguised as a family meeting. It happened the next morning at brunch. The dining room was staged like a country club catalog. Fresh squeezed juices in glass carafes, baskets of warm croissants, monogrammed linen napkins folded like origami swans. Everyone was in their place. Julian, already halfway through his avocado toast, scrolling through his portfolio like it was a news feed. Madison, in cream cashmere, pretending not to be on her third mimosa. I took the same seat I always did. End of the table. Closest to the door. A position of convenience and of removal. My father stood as the last of the dishes were set down. He didn't tap his glass. That would have been too casual. He simply placed his hands on the table, palms flat, and waited until the room quieted around him. "I want to thank everyone for being here this weekend," he began. "These meetings are a legacy in themselves, a way for us to align, reflect, and move forward with discipline and intention." They all nodded like they were under oath. "We've had many successes this year," he continued, "and also moments that required difficult clarity. That's when I felt it, the shift in the room, the eye contact that started to avoid. Madison straightened her posture. Julian stopped scrolling, and I knew what was coming before he said it. He was about to make an example. "As of this quarter," my father said, "we will no longer be extending discretionary trust funding to non-contributing family members." There it was, polished, painless, cold. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew who that was for. Julian cleared his throat. "To be clear, this is about streamlining the family trust's exposure. Not a personal matter," Madison chimed in, her voice soft and reasonable. "It's about priorities, responsibility. We all agreed it was time." I looked around the table. They weren't just agreeing, they were rehearsed. This had been decided long before I arrived. I took a sip of my coffee. Not too fast, not too slow. "Understood," I said. No emotion, no argument. That seemed to rattle them more than a scene would have. My father cleared his throat. "This isn't punitive, Kara. It's just time we focused on assets that align with our long-term vision." I smiled faintly. "You mean people who are profitable?" His face didn't move, neither did mine. There was a pause, long and careful, before he continued. "We believe in your independence," he said. "This decision is simply about responsible allocation. You've chosen your own path. Now it's time to walk it fully. Without the family safety net," Madison added, trying to sound kind. I nodded again. Right. No more distractions. Got it. That one landed. I saw it in her eyes. Because deep down, Madison knew what I was really saying. You think this net was holding me up. You never realized I was already flying. They expected resistance, maybe even begging. Instead, I stood, placed my napkin on the table and said, "Thanks for the croissant." Julian blinked. "You're leaving?" "I have a meeting." "At this hour?" Madison scoffed. I looked at her calmly. Time zones don't care about brunch. I walked out without another word. Got in my car. Drove 10 minutes to a quiet spot overlooking the water. Pulled out my phone and called Alicia. She answered immediately. "It's done," I said. "You okay?" "Better than okay. They made their move, and now we make ours." She sent me the file. I reviewed it one last time. It was clean, powerful, measured. Alicia had titled it, "Mitchell Out, Kara in a little dramatic." But she wasn't wrong. I tapped send on the embargoed press release. Within seconds, it was live. Tech founder Kara Mitchell secures $40 million Series B, led by Flagship Capital. Company now valued at 100 millimeters. The headline rolled out like thunder. I watched the first pickup hit the business wire, then a second. Then a tweet from one of our investors tagging me directly. "Never bet against someone who builds in silence. Congrats, or Karam Tech." I let out a long breath. Not from nerves, from release. Because the whole time they were planning my public disownment, I was building my public arrival. Back at the estate, I knew the phones were starting to ring. Julian would be refreshing his feed, Madison would be texting her PR assistant, and my father, he'd be staring at the name Mitchell in that headline. Except this time, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. I wasn't planning to return after brunch, but I wanted to see their faces, not for revenge, not for validation. I just wanted to look them in the eye while they recalculated everything they thought they knew about me. When I walked back into the Mitchell Estates foyer, the mood had changed. No more polite laughter echoing through the hall. No more glasses clinking. No warmth of performance. Just a stillness. Like the house knew something had cracked. Julian was standing at the bar, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it was written in a language he didn't speak. Madison sat on the edge of the leather couch, one leg crossed, too tightly over the other, her foot bouncing with forced calm. My father was by the fireplace. He turned when I entered. The silence was thick. Madison spoke first. "So, we saw the article." I nodded. "Figured you would." "You raised $40 million? 42, I corrected. "Closed yesterday." Julian laughed under his breath. "Since when were you even talking to Flagship?" I looked at him. "Since before you tried pitching to them last fall. They passed, remember?" His jaw tightened. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. They were doing the math already. They were wondering how I'd done it. How I'd built something under their noses, with no family money, no name leverage, no boardroom blessings. Just silence. And grit. And then my phone rang. Alicia. I answered it on speaker, because something in me wanted the moment to speak for itself. "Hey, boss," she said. Her voice was clear, steady, professional. "Just got off with Flagship's comms team. The article's trending on LinkedIn and Twitter. You're up 18,000 new followers and counting." I glanced at Madison, who once mocked my social presence. Her lips pressed together like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Also," Alicia continued, "TechCrunch wants a quote from the CEO. Can you talk in 10? I didn't say anything right away, just looked around the room. Then, "Tell them I'll call at the top of the hour." "You got it. Congrats again, CEO." The line clicked off, and just like that, the word hung in the air. CEO. My father cleared his throat. You're running the company alone? He asked. I raised an eyebrow. I built it alone. Who's on your board? 3 outside seats, 2 VCs, and me. Madison's eyes narrowed. So, this is real. Wasn't aware. I'd been playing. Julian crossed his arms. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked. They stared at me like I was an optical illusion. Something they couldn't quite reconcile with the version of me they'd been storing in their heads. The mechanic, the failure, the unscalable sibling. My father stepped forward. This changes things, I smiled. It doesn't for me. Kara, listen. I have been, I said, gently but firmly. My whole life. I turned toward the hallway. I didn't need to stay longer. I'd said enough without raising my voice. But before I could reach the door, Madison called out. Wait, I stopped. You're really walking away from all this? I turned back, brow lifted. All what? She motioned around the house, the family, the name, this legacy, this table. I held her gaze. You didn't offer me a seat. You offered me a fork and told me to eat quietly. Madison blinked. And now, I added, you want to talk about legacy. No one answered, because for once they had nothing to say. I walked out into the winter air again. This time, I didn't look back. Inside my car, the heat kicked on slowly. I stared at the dashboard clock. 10 minutes to my call with TechCrunch, Alicia texted me the draft talking points. Lead with vision, not valuation, she wrote. You already proved your worth. I smiled at that, because she was right. They had cut me off. But I wasn't the one bleeding. I was the one growing. They just didn't recognize the roots because they were underground. And now? Now I was blooming in public. I opened my phone and checked the headline again. Kara Mitchell, the stealth founder behind Corelane AI, secures $42 million in funding at a $100 million valuation. Underneath, the first comment read, She's been building in silence. Watch her rise. And I thought, yes, let them watch. The first message came an hour after the article dropped. From Julian, congrats. Would love to grab coffee sometime. Got a few ideas for collaboration. Sent with a thumbs up emoji, like we were LinkedIn acquaintances who used to sit across from each other at Sunday breakfast for 2 decades. I didn't respond. An hour later, it was Madison. So proud of you, cousin. Just read the announcement. Honestly, iconic. Would love to pick your brain about how you approach the investor deck. 3 sparkle emojis, no mention of the brunch ambush from earlier. I left her on red too. But I didn't feel angry. Just clear. Crystal clear. That morning they cut me off. That afternoon they wanted a seat at my table. My father took a little longer. He never rushed. Anything. Not failure. Not forgiveness. Not strategy. It was late evening when he finally appeared outside my office door, backlit by the amber glow of the hallway sconces. I was staying at the estate one more night. I hadn't bothered to unpack. He didn't knock, just hovered, holding a tumbler of scotch like it was part of his bloodstream. Busy day, he said. I didn't answer. He stepped inside. I underestimated what you were building. I raised my eyebrows. You mean ignored? He nodded. No, argument there. He studied me for a long moment, then said, You know, your mother would have been impressed. That stung more than I wanted it to, but I said nothing. He looked around the room like it was foreign to him. It probably was. He'd never seen me at work, never seen what I built when I wasn't trying to earn his permission. I read the press. Release, he said finally. You've got runway now. Real capital. That comes with pressure. I'm used to pressure, I replied. I was raised here. That got a flicker of something from him. Shame, maybe. Or just memory. Then he tried again. I'd be open to contributing. Personally. Or through the family office. If you're raising again in the fall. I stared at him for a long second. And then I said it. No. His eyebrows lifted. I don't want your money, I said. I don't need your money. And more than that, I don't want your name on my work. He exhaled slowly, like someone adjusting to a wound they didn't see coming. You're still a Mitchell, he said. Not in the way you mean. Silence. He didn't fight me. Not really. Because deep down, he knew. He wasn't offering to invest because he believed in me. He was offering because he suddenly saw me, because I'd proven I didn't need him. And now, predictably, he wanted in. But I'd already learned this lesson. There's a difference between being seen and being useful, and I wasn't going to be useful anymore. The next day, I left the estate for good. Didn't pack anything from the closet. Just grabbed my duffel and left the rest. It was all old energy anyway. Clothes I wore to be invisible, shoes I bought to match someone else's idea of success. I drove back to the city with the window cracked and the radio off. The quiet felt earned. Alicia met me at the office. There were flowers on my desk, a card from the flagship team, a bottle of champagne already chilling in the mini fridge. You want to see it? She asked. I nodded. She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. The dashboard. Our user growth graph had a slope that could make a VC weep. Investor notes were pouring in. Journalists were requesting interviews. And in the comment section of our announcement post, something strange was happening. People were defending me. Strangers, founders, women who had been written off at family dinners, men who had been laughed out of boardrooms. They always come, back when it's safe. That's how you know you're winning. You don't need to be invited when you own the building. Mitchell who? She's her own name now. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like I could finally exhale without folding in on myself. Want me to forward the press request from Forbes? Alicia asked. Yeah, I said. But only if they lead with the product, not the drama. She grinned. Already told them. By evening, I was back in my apartment. Small, modern, mine. I stood in the kitchen and made pasta from a box. The cheap kind. I ate it standing up, barefoot, in silence. And I thought, this is what success really is. Not the headlines, not the investors, not even the billion-dollar potential. It's being able to eat over your own counter in your own place, with no one above you pretending they made you. At 10:43 p.m., Madison sent another message. Hey, we're doing a family summit next month. Dad wants to feature some next-gen success stories. Would love to have you speak, short panel. Just 15 minutes. I didn't respond, but I did write something down, a headline for a story I might tell someday. You only see me now because I'm profitable, but I've always been powerful. By the end of the week, 7 people from the extended Mitchell orbit had reached out, some subtle, some direct. All of them wanted something, a conversation, a collaboration, a quote for a college application. A foot in the door they once pretended didn't exist. I ignored them all, because I wasn't interested in proving anything anymore, and that was my power. That Monday, I stepped into our downtown office, the one I used to rent by the hour back, when we were just 2 people with 4 folding chairs and a broken Keurig. Now, it was a real space. 12 full-time team members, 40 contractors, a waiting list of developers wanting to build with us. Alicia was already there, standing by the whiteboard, half laughing. You've been busy, she said. Me? She gestured to the board. Someone had written the word billion in all caps, with a question mark beside it and a sticky note that read, Q4 expansion goals? I chuckled. We'll get there. You already are, she said, dead serious. You just haven't updated the mirror. That line stuck with me, because for so long I kept my head down, focused, quiet, careful. I didn't let myself look up too often, afraid I'd get lost in what still wasn't done, afraid someone would call me a fraud before I could prove otherwise. But now I didn't feel afraid. I felt anchored. Later that day, we had our first investor strategy session. 4 VCs, 1 founder, and me, the CEO who built it all with 0 favors and a pile of rejections that used to keep me up at night. They asked smart questions. I gave clear answers. We weren't trying to impress them anymore. We were building with them, not for them. At the end of the meeting, one of them leaned back and said, You've got something rare, Kara. Not just the tech, the temperament. I smiled. I spent 10 years being underestimated. You learn how to build strong when no one's watching. That evening my father called, 2nd time in a week. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then picked up. Hi, I said. He didn't waste time. I spoke to a contact at Aston Partners, he said. They're hearing good things. Word is you might IPO within 18 months. Maybe, I replied. That's not the focus right now. He cleared his throat. You know, when your mother and I started Mitchell Holdings, we had no idea it would become a legacy brand. But we learned early that optics matter. And family brands, well, they can be powerful. There it was. The pitch. I'm not looking for a family brand, I said. I'm building a product. One that stands on its own. And the name? He asked carefully. I've thought about changing it, I said honestly. Dropping Mitchell, using my mother's maiden name, something clean. He paused. You don't need to erase where you came from. I'm not, I said quietly. I'm just done asking for permission to be more than where I came from. Another pause. Then, we're having a private dinner next month, just the core family. I'd like you to come. I'll think about it. And I meant it. I wasn't angry, I was just tired of being a show pony they only pulled out for headlines. A few days later, Madison sent me a link to her podcast. She'd recorded a solo episode titled, When Your Cousin Becomes a Powerhouse CEO. It was 10 minutes of forced admiration, fake nostalgia, and strategic name-dropping. I've always believed in Kara, she said, her voice smooth as glass. Even when we didn't understand her vision, we knew she was different. Different. Not brilliant, not bold, not right. Just different. Like I was a flavor, not a force. I didn't respond, but I did take a screenshot. Not for revenge, for reference. To remind myself what people sound like when they try to rewrite your history without owning their part in it. A week later, we signed a global partnership with one of the biggest fintech platforms in Europe. Another email from Julian arrived. Massive. Congrats. If you ever need a CFO down the road, I'd be happy to step in. I forwarded it to Alicia with one word. Blocked. Because here's what no one tells you when you finally make it. It's not just about proving them wrong. It's about protecting what you've built from the people who now pretend they were there the whole time, and I wasn't going to let them sneak in through the back door of my success. Not now. Not ever. That Friday, I took the day off for the first time in 6 months. Went to the farmer's market, bought a loaf of bread I didn't need, sat in the park with my notebook and sketched ideas for the next product rollout. A little girl passed by with her mom, holding a toy laptop and calling herself Boss Lady. I smiled. Because she was. Because we all are, when no one's telling us otherwise. That night, I opened a new document and typed the title, The Power of No. It wasn't a memo. It was a reminder. that no was a full sentence, that boundaries were a currency, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when they finally want you at the table is to build your own and lock the door behind you. I never thought I'd be the one to rewrite the Mitchell legacy. I always assumed it would be Julian, standing at the head of some polished boardroom table with a half smile and a family crest behind him. Or Madison, staging a podcast empire and weaving our name into the public consciousness like a brand slogan. But it wasn't either of them. It was me. The girl they dismissed. The one they forgot to set a place for. The one they cut off before the ink on her ambition had even dried, and now I was the one making the calls, not for revenge, for clarity, for control, for change. 3 months after our funding round closed, I launched the Kara Mitchell Foundation, a nonprofit incubator for overlooked women founders. First-time CEOs, single moms building in their garages, high school coders with more grit than connections. We gave them funding. We gave them tools. But more importantly, we gave them room. No conditions. No backroom deals. No family politics. Alicia came into my office the morning the first cohort was announced, holding a printed list of applicants. We had over 2,000 submissions, she said, grinning. I looked at the names I didn't know, stories I hadn't read yet, people I had never met, and still believed in more than my own family ever believed in me. This was the legacy I wanted. Not land, not bloodlines, not inheritance wrapped in conditions, but something alive, evolving, bigger than any dinner table I'd been excluded from. That week, Forbes released a feature titled, "Kara Mitchell didn't just survive, she rebuilt the system." The article quoted my investors, my engineers, and even a few competitors who admitted, begrudgingly, that I had changed the game. They asked for a photo shoot at the Mitchell estate. I declined. We shot in my office instead. I wore a black turtleneck, no jewelry, no symbolism, just me, clean, quiet, whole. That Friday, my father called. Again. This time, I answered. "Nice article," he said. "Thanks. I always knew you were sharp." I waited. He didn't say more, because he couldn't, because what he wanted to say was, "You proved me wrong, but I didn't need to hear it anymore. What's up?" I asked. He hesitated. "We're thinking about restructuring the trust board," he said. "Bringing in next-gen leadership." I nearly laughed. "You're offering me a seat?" I said. "Yes." "No, thank you." He paused. "You don't want to be involved in the family's direction?" "I already am," I said. He didn't ask what I meant, but I think he knew that for the first time, the Mitchell name wasn't a weight. It wasn't a wall. It was a shadow. And I had stepped out of it. That night, I spoke at a summit for women in venture capital. The room was filled with people who knew how hard the climb was, how often the ladder gets yanked, the pitch decks ignored, the titles questioned, and I told them the truth. I wasn't underestimated because I was weak. I was underestimated because I was building quietly. And when you build quietly, you build better. Applause rose like a wave. But I didn't pause for it. I was told I was difficult, that I lacked polish, that I didn't belong in the family portfolio. They cut me off and called it discipline. But all they did was set me free. Afterward, 3 women from the audience came up to me in tears. One said, "My father told me I wasn't built for business. Thank you for showing me I am," another whispered. "I quit my job today because I knew there was something more. And now I believe there is." And I thought, this is what legacy really means. Not the name, not the money, but the ripple, the blueprint, the proof. A week later, Julian sent an email. He wanted to schedule a call. He said he was launching a founder-first fund and wanted advice. Didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Alicia with one line. Send him the Foundation's public application link. We help people, not brands. A few days later, I walked through my office after hours. Desks quiet, lights low, air still warm from the people who spent all day creating something that wasn't supposed to exist. And I realized I wasn't climbing anymore. I was standing, rooted, alive, and completely my own. I stopped at the wall where we framed our founding documents, our first articles of incorporation, our first seed check, a sticky note Alicia wrote that read, "Let's burn slower and brighter." Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the Mitchell family crest, the one I found stuffed in a drawer after my mother died. I pinned it beneath the documents, but I didn't center it. I didn't polish it. I just let it sit there. Small, quiet, acknowledged, but no longer obeyed, because the Mitchell legacy didn't own me anymore. It reported to me. 1 year to the day after they cut me off, I threw a dinner of my own. Not at the Mitchell estate, not at some legacy club wrapped in mahogany and generational ego. I rented a rooftop in the city, brick-lined, fairy-lit, filled with soft music and hard-earned laughter. There were no press passes, no family crests, no seating charts based on bloodlines or net worth. Just the people who showed up when I was still invisible, the ones who didn't need a headline to see my value. Alicia brought the guest list on paper, even though we didn't need it, 70. RSVPs, she said. Every single person who believed in you when no one else did. Make it 71, I said. You forgot yourself. She rolled her eyes. You're getting soft. Just nostalgic. The tables were long and communal. No head seat, no hierarchy. Just plates of food passed around like ideas. And laughter layered into the music like harmony. Ty, our first engineer, gave a toast about the early days. About how he once coded for 12 hours straight while I sat beside him building our pitch. Deck and Canva because we couldn't afford design software yet. Someone yelled, "We still use that slide." Everyone laughed. But I didn't. I just watched the room, because I wanted to feel every second of it, every smile, every clink of glass, every bit of oxygen I wasn't allowed to take up in my own family. Madison didn't show up. Neither did Julian. My father sent a bottle of wine. No note. I left it unopened. Not out of pettiness, out of peace. He wasn't the villain in this story. He was just the beginning of it. And beginnings don't get to dictate endings. Alicia eventually tapped her glass and said, "We're making Kara speak now, right?" Everyone clapped. I stood slowly, heart quiet but steady. And I said what I meant. I spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant to feed me. I began. They told me I wasn't ready, that I wasn't serious, that I needed more polish, more pedigree, more patience. Soft laughter. Nods. People remembering their own versions of that lie. And for a long time I believed them, I said. I thought silence was humility. That invisibility meant I hadn't earned it yet. But what I've learned, what we've built, is proof that some tables aren't broken. They're just too small. I let that settle. Then I smiled. So I stopped asking for a seat, and I built my own. A pause. And then the room rose. Not out of politeness, out of recognition, out of that quiet ache we all carry, the one that whispers you're not enough, until someone shows you that you already are. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and candles burned low, I stood at the edge of the rooftop, watching the skyline. The city I once tried to prove myself in now stood quietly behind me. No judgment, just space. Alicia walked up beside me. "You did it," she said. I looked at her. "No," I said. "We did," she grinned. "Still think. You'll drop Mitchell?" I thought about that, about every time the name had been used as a filter, as a threat. as a door that was always locked unless you played by someone else's rules. Then I shook my head. I'm keeping it, I said. But not for them. For who then? For the girl they underestimated. A breeze picked up, warm, clean, and I knew, deep in my chest, that I wasn't carrying the name anymore. I was redefining it. A few guests lingered late into the night. We sat in a circle on outdoor couches, shoes off, desserts half-eaten, talking like people who had finally found their people. No one asked me what was next. No one needed to. They knew I'd already built what I came for. Not a product. Not a valuation. But a life. Mine. The next morning, I woke up early, walked to my favorite cafe, and ordered the same coffee I used to buy when I had to check my account balance first. The barista smiled. Kara, right? I nodded. We're all rooting for you. I smiled back, even though my throat tightened a little, because I knew what she meant. Not rooting for your company, not your numbers. You. She was rooting for me. I walked to the park and sat on a bench, sipping my coffee slowly, letting the morning stretch long and golden across the city. A little girl passed by with her dad, pulling a plastic wagon filled with blocks. She was narrating her build like a CEO giving a product demo. This one makes the others stronger, she said. This one connects everything. This one goes right in the middle so nothing falls. She caught me watching and waved. I waved back and thought, that's the real legacy, not money, not headlines, not even the product we launched, but strength. That multiplies, that connects, that holds.